Before the Munich Olympic Games in 1972, Olympic athletes had the freedom and luxury of walking around freely in their host villages.
This luxury was shattered on September 4th, 1972, in Munich, Germany, when tragedy struck the Olympic Games.
The Olympic Games were a symbol of international cooperation and had always functioned in terms of harmony, even among groups of people who often were quite hostile to one another. And of course, the other factor was that it was happening in Germany. And certainly the record of the Nazis and the Holocaust against Jews made everyone particularly sensitive to anything that would happen in Germany that would concern Jews.
It all started as a peaceful morning in the Olympic Village, until right around 5 a.m. This is when 8 Arab terrorists armed with submachine guns went to the headquarters of the Israeli athletes.
What happened next was horrific. At 4:14 a.m., the terrorists first climbed the fence into the village holding hand grenades. Because of the lack of security, their entrance wasn't even noticed until after the first killing. Luckily, they only captured 11 athletes since the other athletes in the nearby apartments were able to escape.
After they were able to jump over the fence surrounding the Olympic Village, which housed the athletes, they went inside looking for Israelis. Once inside, they immediately killed Israeli wrestling coach Moshe Weinberg, who was trying to protect the members of his team. The terrorist group, which was named Black September, then took 9 hostages, all of which were athletes on the Israeli team.
One of the things that terrorists are all about is trying to gain publicity and get their message across. Okay. And in the case of the Y, specifically the Israelis, their claim was that the Israelis had uprooted Palestinians from their homeland. They wanted to be able to return. And at that point, certainly the Black September people were committed to literally driving the Israelis out of the Middle East.
Manny, there's someone right now. That certainly has to be one of the guerrillas. One of them is believed to be a woman. And this has happened time and time and time again. The door opening, the head coming out to see what is going on.
Black September then demanded that 234 Palestinian prisoners be released from an Israeli prison. A 5 p.m. deadline was set for the release of the Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the athletes. German officers then decided to invade the building in which the terrorists and athletes were in. They hoped to get the hostages out and arrest the terrorists. The code word Sunshine was put into place for when they would invade. But since the police officers had no information, the plan never went through. Plan Sunshine was canceled.
In just a half an hour, the deadline will have expired. Arab guerrillas are still holding inside the rooms of the Israeli Olympic team 9 people, one of them believed dead. A police spokesman said a squad of 38 volunteers would storm the house if a deal had not been worked out with the Arabs by the deadline. The deadline appears to us to be less than 1 minute away. What you're seeing is live. It's happening now. And now we've gotten an official time check. It is 5 o'clock. This is the deadline. The storming, if it is going to happen, could happen at any moment. Mine passed almost an hour ago. Anything to report at all, Peter?
It is now extremely obvious that the lookout at this side of the building is carrying his weapon at all times. He closed the door for a considerable length of time, and John Wilcox from ABC, who is even closer than both you and me, in fact 50 feet away, tells me on our two-way walkie-talkie that the commando looks very much more nervous than he did a while ago, and he certainly has an apprehensive, darting about look from here, almost as if they do sense that something is very imminent.
At the 5 p.m. deadline, the police officers were to go into the building so things could be resolved. The Germans agreed.
And here's the village, where finally the Germans agreed to let the Arabs take their hostages to the heliport.
Parked under the building would drive the terrorists and hostages to helicopters. All cars on the streets were cleared out as the buses drove through. Then the helicopters would fly athletes and terrorists 20 miles to an airbase. When the buses arrived at the helicopters, 4 hostages were put in the first one and 5 in the second.
It looks like they're getting ready to, leave the building.
Jeff Mason, this is Cosell, a police official standing here, clearing everybody away. Told me that a deal had been made. The Arabs would be coming out within 5 minutes, and they expect the arrival of a helicopter within 5 minutes.
This is right, Peter. The buses arrived with the helicopters. Yes, this is Vance Colvig, and I'm in the Olympic Hotel. One helicopter has just lifted off, and the second one looks like it's leaving the ground shortly.
The terrorists had their weapons held to the hostages' heads. The helicopters did a loop around the Olympic Village and then disappeared into the night. German officers were positioned around the airbase, but they had no telescopes, guns, night vision equipment, bulletproof vests, walkie-talkies, or helmets.
3 German snipers were positioned on the roof, and 2 were positioned on the ground, but the officers couldn't see each other. They were in each other's line of fire and had no way of knowing it since they lacked any way to communicate.
But they also had another plan in place. They had fully loaded a jet with fuel, and 16 police officers dressed as flight attendants and maintenance workers. They were ordered to ambush the terrorists upon arrival.
But the Germans then realized that the terrorists were too smart and would realize that the officers were not legitimate workers. They decided not to go through with the plan. The problem was the terrorists were only minutes away when the officers decided to stop the plan.
Without walkie-talkie radios, no other members knew that the plan was canceled. When the terrorists arrived, they went to inspect the jet. They realized it had no crew and that they had been tricked. At this moment, the German snipers were ordered to shoot.
The terrorists shot out the lights so the officers and snipers would have no vision. The pilots of the helicopters escaped, but the hostages could not because they were tied to the seats inside the helicopters.
Close to midnight, German officers came in with armed vehicles. The terrorists in Black September reacted to this by machine gunning the hostages. The snipers attempted to shoot the terrorists, but not before a hand grenade exploded, killing them. In the end, all Israeli hostages were killed and 5 terrorist bodies were accounted for.
After a search, the police found the other 3 terrorists. They were then arrested and stripped down. The terrorists thought they were going to be executed, but the German officers had no plan on killing them.
A memorial service was held for the victims on September 6th, the day after all hostages were dead.
Our worst fears have been realized tonight. They have now said that there were 11 hostages. 2 were killed in their rooms yesterday morning. 9 were killed at the airport tonight. They're all gone.
The president of the International Olympic Committee at the time said that the games would go on instead of declaring war. Stopping the games and starting the war would be giving the terrorists what they wanted.
The terrorists were put into jail for 2 months, but were never put on trial. On Sunday, October 29, 1972, a plane going from Syria to Germany was hijacked by 2 Palestinian terrorists, who threatened to blow up the plane if the Germans didn't release the 3 captured terrorists of Black September.
The Germans released them to the other members of the terrorist group immediately. The terrorists then took a plane to Libya, where they received a hero's welcome.
But the Israeli Secret Service shot 2 of the 3 survivors of Black September. The last survivor is still living and hiding. There has been only 1 Olympic attack since Munich, the bombing on the Atlanta Games in 1996. The original plan for the Munich Olympic Games was to show the world how Germany had changed since the Nazi regime during Hitler's rule. The fear of terror hangs over the Games. They are considered to be a prime terrorism target for international law enforcement agencies. But the attacks in Munich did bring attention to the security. In Munich 1972, only $2 million was spent on security. The next Olympiad in Montreal in 1976 spent $100 million on security, and in London this past year, $850 million was spent on security alone.
So on the one hand, there was the pressure saying that this is news and people have a right to know the news. On the other hand, there was the objection saying that because they were given so much publicity and so much attention, that might in turn encourage other groups to try to do the same kinds of things, knowing that how much attention they would receive and how much time the media was going to give them.
The 1972 Munich Games, the general public of the world has learned to live with security searches in airports, arenas, and at other public events due to the threat of terrorism. The incident at the Munich forced the United States federal government to make many changes involving security, especially in the State Department and the way that it would handle diplomatic security.
Germany also took certain steps to increase security after the Munich Games. The Germans created a special secret service agency called the GSG-9 after Black September's attack at the Olympics. Munich acted as a major turning point in sports broadcasting as well as security, not only for the Olympic Games but all year long. It also increased Olympic spending greatly to ensure the safety of the athletes who went to compete.
Don't you forget about me.